Ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
Which means we're back.
Hello.
For our weekly episodes of Peak Speak that Thomas promised and then absolutely unequivocally did not deliver on.
It's only been 2 weeks. Normally it's like 2 months.
I mean, yeah, sure. But, you know, you made bold claims and you didn't back them up, Thomas.
We never set a time.
To clarify, we never said shit. This was your idea. I've been here the whole time. Just waiting. I took a very nice screenshot of the Thomas Lilly has been notified you're in the meeting and will be here soon, so I can post it on Instagram and be like, POV, when you're the least important half of Peak Speak and you have to wait on the gym overlord.
Should I put up the first clip of the recording, which is your empty chair, with you nowhere to be found?
You're welcome to, but I feel like if we go through a back catalogue of empty chair recordings, I'm probably still going to win that one. Plus, there's also no video. This is an entirely audio podcast, so I don't know what you want me to do with that.
Sam, start a YouTube. Oh, wait, continue the YouTube.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, don't we have a YouTube already? I feel like we've done that before. We went videos for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm reminded in my brief trip to the restroom that it is grey, cold, and a bit kind of gloomy in Canberra. But that's Canberra at this time of year. So yeah, other than that, I'm all right. Chugging away.
Good. Well,
how are you?
As you noticed, I was wearing a hoodie. This is the first day this year at the gym that I've worn a hoodie. So it is also obviously extremely cold.
Yes.
In Queensland.
21 degrees?
Probably something like that.
Yeah. I think the top in Canberra is 13 today. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. I like Canberra. I maintain, apart from these like grey, cold, slightly damp days, this time of year is generally the best time of year to be in Canberra. I reckon the weather in Canberra at this time of year is unbeatable.
Yeah, I much prefer the cold.
Yeah, this is peak season in my eyes because it's cold but mostly sunny. Like generally at this time of year, it's mostly dry. It can get below zero in the mornings. As someone who runs and rides bikes, I don't care about that. I just wear more layers. It's fine. And then generally by lunchtime, the sun's out and it's somewhere between 14 and 20 degrees. And there's not a cloud in the sky and it's glorious. And then it gets cold again and it's fine. But yeah, the grey, gloomy, wet days can go and get fucked.
It's the problem with Queensland cold is that there's select pockets and select small windows of time that are actually cold enough to warrant a hoodie. So you just find yourself on days like these constantly taking off your hoodie and putting it back on, and putting it back on.
This is the time of year where I go through 3 outfits a day because I'm wearing long pants and a jumper in the morning to train or whatever. And then I'm in a t-shirt, maybe even shorts sometimes during the day. But then by about 4 o'clock, you got to put pants and a jumper back on. And so you just end up doing a lot more washing. But it's also there's never quite enough sun to dry any of your clothes. So we've just got the fucking dryer running constantly, which is annoying.
Yeah, nice. Well, not so nice, but your sunrises are good.
Yeah, I will happily put this time of year Burley Strength's winter sunrises up against any other gym in the country. I would even go as far to say the world, but that's because I'm cocky. Feel free to submit your requests for competition, but you're going to be hard-pressed to beat it.
Yes, well, I can't because I've never been to my gym in 12 years before the sun comes up. So there we go.
Well, you do have a whole company of gym underlings that you could happily just assign to that. Although I feel like maybe you have to pay extra when they're at work before the sun comes up. I don't know how the wages work. That's your job.
Probably. I don't know how many of them start that early. I think James does some early starts. The staffed hours are from 7 a.m, so it's always up by the time everyone starts anyway. But I think James does some like 5 a.m. sessions every now and again.
I don't know. James always struck me as pretty lazy when it comes to that sort of thing.
No, James is the opposite. He's an early riser. He's like me.
I'm just giving him shit. I just like giving James shit.
I'm just defending him to make it sound like I'm not the one who gives him the most shit.
Yeah, I was going to say, further up the totem pole, that's how it works, right? Shit rolls downhill. That's the best part about being the boss, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's not many hills in this department, brother. It's a pretty flat department, if you ask me.
Yeah,
if anything, it's probably a bit more the opposite. I'm in the
valley. I was going to say it's a crater.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right,
what are we talking about today, Thomas? It was your idea to have a topic for the first time, and I'm calling it 6 months, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, we all spend too much time on social media in general, and I just think it's interesting as social media has evolved that for our industry especially, how you earn your place as an authority is far less these days the same as it was before. Like before, it was like you were either a great lifter and then you position yourself as a coach, or you earn your stripes as a coach and then you become an authority. Now you get to decide if you're an authority or not, and people get to decide if they believe you're an authority or not. And so you have this interesting situation where people position themselves as authorities by just regurgitating other people's information. And that sounds worse than what it is. Any scientific pursuit is regurgitating the work of other people. It's giving it honor and reverence. But it's just weird that there's fitness industry authorities that have never coached anyone, really, have never coached anyone worth mentioning, and never achieved anything athletically. I find that quite strange.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've gone back and forwards in my head on for a long time, because I've been relatively mediocre at all of my athletic pursuits, and so that comes with it, especially in the powerlifting space, where people like you and lots of other very successful powerlifting coaches are also fucking crazy strong, and I've often battled with that feeling of imposter syndrome that comes with maybe I'm not strong enough to do this, right? I maintain a lot of it is actually that you probably don't always want the best athlete in the room to be the coach you've got, because for a lot of the case, those athletes, those athletes haven't had to work in the same way to get where they are, right? There's the people that got where they were in spite of their methods as opposed to because of them. And so I've definitely wrestled with this for a long time, and I think I've sort of settled probably further on the side of you need to have earned your stripes than I maybe would have in the past. But that's because I think of exactly what you said, where these days, if you're kind of okay at Canva and you have an expensive camera and you want to invest in your fucking Rode mic, I don't know why so many people fucking love that one microphone. No one else is Sam Sulek. Stop wearing it on your hat, you dickheads.
I don't know why no one just uses the lapel function that comes with it.
I don't use lapel mics because lapel mics don't work when you got a beard.
I was going to say it'd just be really rustly for you.
Yeah. Because I have to wear a lapel mic down here, and they just don't work in that scenario. They're way too far away from you. I use shotgun mics and stuff like that.
Well, but considering most of these people are children or have testosterone levels that don't elicit beard growth, it's not going to be a problem for most people.
Exactly. I think that's the thing that irks me these days is you can be fresh out of your PT course and just kind of know how to make colors look good, do exactly like you said, just completely regurgitate other people's information and ideas and stuff like that, and end up in a position where suddenly you have a following and you're considered an authority despite not having any real fucking experience. And that's the thing that irks me in a way that makes me feel like people need to earn their stripes themselves a little bit more than perhaps I would have said they needed to a while ago. I don't think you need to be a world-class athlete, but if you haven't at least done the thing you're coaching people in, not even well, but you've done it for a while, I think it's a little bit disingenuous,
Yeah, so this is where I wrestle with it as well, because it's why is that? Why is it a problem in the first place? It's not like you can't be smart and can't know so much about training and can't actually learn to some degree the experience of the elite, even if you've never been the elite or coached the elite. But there is just something to be said for lived experience that is intangible, that cannot be taught. And I think that's the only part of it that irks me. And I think it irks me that that's the only part of it that irks me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a level of empathy, right, that comes from you can't get it from a textbook. You can't get it from a weekend course, because no book, no course will ever describe to you what it feels like to be 4 weeks out from a powerlifting meet and have every single joint in your body hurt, despite the fact that you're eating more than you've ever eaten before, sleeping more than you've ever slept before, and suddenly you're second guessing everything you've ever done to get to this point and whether you're capable of finishing this next 4 weeks. Like, I can't describe it to you, but every powerlifter who's trained really hard knows that feeling, because I've had that discussion with hundreds of powerlifters, right? Thousands of powerlifters at this point. That is a universal experience at some point in this process, and you can't learn what that feels like from a book, which means then I think at least you're in a position where you can't empathize with the person in front of you in the way that you need to be able to do to give them effective and useful coaching advice. Because, you need to empathize, but you also need to tell them to suck the fuck up and keep going, because without that aspect of it, you lose the benefit, right?
Yeah.
There is a point where, sorry, dude, this sucks. I know it sucks. It's a good thing that it sucks. That's how we know we're onto something, right? And I've actually very much had this experience over the last couple of years, almost again, being comfortable coaching people in endurance stuff and running and things like that, right? I'm still very fresh in pursuing that as a thing personally in my eyes. Like, I've been doing it now for 4 or 5 years, but that's still really fresh in my head compared to what I know about lifting, because I've been doing that for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's now I'm in a position where I am comfortable talking about it as an authority. I don't position myself as an authority, but I mean, I can have conversations with the people I'm coaching that I consider to be authoritative, in that I know what I'm talking about. I can build a program that works for things. I'm not perfect, but I never will be. But it's because I've had the experience of training hard, following programs, doing that stuff, and digging into that I know the pitfalls of it. I know how to build through plateaus and do those kind of things. That's the stuff that I don't think you can ever properly learn without having at least tried it a couple of times yourself.
Yeah, and I mean it's a great example, because I'm not we've spoken about this plenty of times before on the podcast. I'm not a believer that you have to be the best athlete to be the best coach, or to earn that empathy.
No, I agree.
You've often referred to like the oh fuck moment, unracking a heavy squat kind of thing. You can get that as a reasonably inexperienced lifter, as long as the relative level that you're competing at or lifting at is close enough. You can earn that without having to be the absolute top of the game. And I mean, like that example you're using with running and being relatively fresh, I think your opinions and your level of authority is going to evolve because you're a student of the game in general.
Absolutely.
But like what you're confident in now, as you develop, you'll maybe learn that some of the stuff wasn't the best advice or wasn't great. And I think that experiential, that iterative process that you have to go to be a great coach is what's missing from people who position themselves as this. And it's hard because like a lot of the times they're doing a great job, they're putting out decent enough content, but sometimes some of this stuff just misses the mark based on the fact that someone who does have the experience can look at it and be like, nah, that's just not how it goes. And it's so hard to put that into words.
And I think the thing that one of the reasons I get kind of irked by that style of content, or the thing that maybe raises a subconscious red flag, is the language and how you do it in that scenario. Often I find these are the people who are talking about like, this is how it works, as opposed to this is how I've done it, or this is how I coach it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that seems on the surface like a relatively small distinction, but I actually think it speaks very deeply to the persona behind the process, because I very deliberately only use language around like, this is how it works in the way that I do things and stuff like that, because I am just speaking about my experience and the models I use, and it is from that context that I speak, right? That's the thing I consider to myself to be an authority on, is my method of coaching and the model I use and the processes and those sort of things. Do I think it's the best? Maybe not. Do I think it's the best one for me? It currently is, and it continues to iterate over time. The changes get smaller. It's more refining ideas and stories in the process and those kind of things. I feel like I only just got here and I'm fucking 15 years into being a coach. Like, I feel like if I was 2 years into this and trying to speak with this sort of authority, I'd have a real hard time feeling okay with it. But that's just me, right? I still sometimes feel like I'm not an authority enough to speak about the things that I speak about. But I have the proof to myself, at least, because I've done it, and I can show myself the list of achievements. And I think that's, at least from my point of view, where I feel like it gets a bit gross is yeah, you're like 23, man. How can you genuinely tell someone in their mid-30s who comes to you as a client, like, I could not empathize with someone in their 30s struggling to be consistent in the gym when I was 23. That was a thing I struggled actively with. Yeah. Now I get it. Now I say to people all the time, like, hey, maybe the barrier for your win in training is not that you got your whole training session done, it's that you drove to the gym and parked in the car park. Like, I've said that to a few people this week who are, you know, being the consistent, I've bounced back and forwards through training cycles over my life. It hasn't been consistent enough. I feel like I should be doing it. That sort of person, that anyone who trains any general population people, that's the person you most often get, right? Yeah. That is unequivocally the most common client, is the person who's done something like class model stuff, cycled out of it, got a bit bored, tried a bunch of gym stuff by themselves. Like, that generic person is very, very common. And until I got to a point where I could empathize with the idea of, like, I turned up today and tried and it just wasn't there, I had a hard time getting through to a person like that. I said to, I think, 3 people in the last maybe 4 weeks, I think you should set your barrier for a win in your first month as you drove to the gym and parked your car and turned it off. And then you sit in the car and you have an honest conversation with yourself about whether you are genuinely up for this or not. And if you're not, be honest with yourself about it and just go home. And that's still a win, right? Because you did the first step in the process, which is you turned up. And when you turn up, you're probably going to then walk through the door, and that's how it spitballs, right? At 23, I just couldn't empathize with the idea that you struggle to get to the gym more than once a week. Like, what do you mean? Do you really want the things you're talking about? Just fucking do it. Like, it's not that hard. Yeah, it turns out it is that hard, and that version of me was a dickhead.
Yeah. It's just that lived experience, that empathy that comes with it. It actually annoys me, and I know we've spoken about this before as well, because there's still, like, for some reason, very few elite female coaches in powerlifting.
Yeah,
yeah. It annoys me that if someone can get on the internet and position themselves as an authority, there's so many elite female lifters that are also excellent coaches that don't get considered. And why? Is it because they're female? Is it because, in general, I believe it's just like people are going to pick the person who squats 350 rather than 200. I literally think it's as primitive as that, rather than female or male. But it kind of then subconsciously perpetuates this idea that females are weaker than men, therefore men shouldn't get coaching from females, which is just ludicrous.
Yeah, but then the problem with that is we end up with a whole bunch of fucking men screaming to women about how they can teach them to train around their hormone cycles. What the fuck are you talking about, dude? You've never had that experience. How the fuck? And, like, this is actually probably the classic example in this whole thing, is I genuinely am mystified by how any man with any sense of fucking self can even study heaps of science and then purport to explain to any woman anywhere that they are the authority on how to modify their training around their hormonal cycle. Like, that just really irks me. And it's the fucking top of a really dark pit in science and medicine around women's experiences that we don't need to do a whole fucking ranty podcast on. But
I think you hit the nail on the head, though. That's like the quintessential example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it just irks me. I say it to women all the time, like, how could it is a height of arrogance for me as a man to suggest to you that I know your body better than you will. And why the fuck would I put you in a position where you have to agree with me? Like, that is just immediately puts you in this fucking gross spot. It genuinely makes me feel ill talking about that as an idea. Like, imagining myself as that person makes me feel fucking gross.
Yeah. Do you think there's a point where someone who might fit this category actually legitimizes themselves without achieving something great, excuse me, in air quotes, athletically or from a coaching perspective? Because I kind of do. I think people eventually
absolutely.
can. It's almost like the experience from just being that person over time. Even like you use your example of being a personal trainer and not understanding that. You would have learned a lot about being a parent before you became a parent. You just know a lot more now that you are a parent, you know?
Yeah, but then I think that's another good example, though. Like, up until the moment I was a parent, I never felt like I would be in a position to give parenting advice. I am currently a parent. I don't think I'm in a position to give parenting advice, right? Like, and I think that probably speaks more to my the type of person I am, and maybe this is actually where the difference is, right? Is that it's just a moral question more than anything else. But I absolutely think there is, and I think this is the thing where I don't know if it's not legitimate, right? Like, I don't know if that's the way I would describe it. I think the problem is less in it being legitimate or not legitimate, and I think it's actually more in how the system works. I think you can be good at producing content and educating people. I don't think that necessarily makes you a good coach. Right? I think you can be a good coach who's also incredibly good at educating people. I think you're one of those people. But I don't think the two are always hand in hand. And I think that's actually the problem from my point of view, is that the route into coaching in this example is you produce enough content that people start hiring you as a coach. And I think that's that's actually the wrong way for it to work, right? I produce the least amount of content when I'm busiest. Like, when my client load is at its highest, I spend most of my time coaching people and doing the jobs around the rest of my business. I work for myself and I'm the only person that works there, so it's a bit different than someone like you who has people working for them. But I think that's where it loses its quote unquote legitimacy. And I think that's the problem in the system, is that we can't easily differentiate between someone who produces content for a living. And the problem is, the only way to monetize your content is offering a service like that, right? Because the average consumer is going to consume your content and then go pay a coach. And they're not going to then continue to pay you for content or something like that. And so it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. And I feel like that's where the problem is. I don't have a solution for it.
Man, I think that sums it up perfectly. I think, this discussion, like the point I raised, the topic I raised in the first place was me being like, I don't actually know how I feel about it, and then that's kind of concluded it for me in terms of, okay, that makes sense. Like, because what I was saying before, do you think there's a point where someone does become legitimate? I think if you're putting out content, educational content, and then you're monetizing via coaching, over time, if you're smart enough, you'll learn to be a good coach, and then your content will evolve as a result. You'll get better as a coach, and your content will get better as a content producer, content creator, whatever they're called. I think people, however, people are more at risk. I mean, there's risk either way. Like if you are a coach and then you produce content, there's a risk that you're too arrogant, you never learn from your coaching experience, and you just produce
absolutely.
shitty content. If you're a content creator, there's a risk that you're too arrogant in what you know and you never actually learn experientially as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah,
I think that was genuinely a thought that kind of came to me as I was saying it. But I actually posted a reel, maybe it was yesterday. There was a clip that I somewhat got by accident in a coaching session. Like I was talking to someone about it. And one of the things I've talked to a lot of people about recently is one of the more frustrating experiences in coaching is I complain a lot about aspects of coaching now and things you see on the internet, and I bitch about them. And I hate it because I'm bitching about myself. Like, this video is about, I really fucking hate people setting your lats or cues like that in deadlifts, because almost everyone I've seen deadlifting recently just like doesn't actually use their lats properly and extends their upper back and just it looks like shit and it never works properly. And pulling the slack out of the bar are two of these great examples that we've talked about at various different points of cues that are misinterpreted or given by people with an awareness of their body that the person in front of them lacks, and so there's a disconnect in how that cue is implemented. And so I've complained a bunch about that sort of thing, but it's that, I think that's where you often see the differentiating factor in, you can almost see the shift in the content they produce. It goes from like, here's this solution to this quite generic problem. When you lose your attention off the floor, you should set your lats more in the deadlift or something like that, right? And it goes further to like more conceptual ideas, or like, at least the people I follow, it's content that is more like, here's a somewhat niche but common version of a problem, and here's the somewhat unorthodox solution to it, or here's the way we address it in the model we use, or things like that. I think that's often where you see that divergence from like, I'm just producing content that is largely parroting ideas I've got from other people and selling them as my own, and into I am producing content that is about me and my coaching philosophy, which is a conclusion of everything I've ever consumed. And maybe that's where the divergence, at least from my eyes, you can kind of see it. I think it goes, it often goes from being like overproduced canvas slides to like real world examples of clients they've actually had success with and that sort of thing. And I think that's the big thing actually to look for, is if you're assessing someone on the internet for their coaching viability, do they spend most of their time posting content that's themselves, or do they spend a lot of their time posting results they've got for people, or talking about ways they've got those results in unorthodox manners or things like that? Yeah, maybe that's where the line gets drawn. I don't know.
For sure. No, man, I think that's a good way to sort of sum it all up. I guess I just want to reiterate that I don't actually think it's a problem. Like it's not a. I think it's great that we have more information, education.
Yeah, absolutely.
It more started as like an observation that I wanted to talk about, because it's you used the term irking us earlier. I just find it strange more than anything, or interesting. Because we had, I'm not saying we come from an age where it was better, because it definitely wasn't. Like the irony is
it was worse, if anything, because
our education
there was
like,
less information, but it was like, well, because there's less information, we just have to assume this is gospel. Like this is how it works. There's no counter argument. There's no like opposing views. It's okay. Well, cool. That's how it works.
Yeah. And it's just like, this is the biggest, strongest dude. He's saying do that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, fucking
this is the brand that everyone trusts. They're saying do that. We're going to do that. No question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of benefit to the thought-provoking stuff that comes out of like the new age of information. There's pros and cons for sure, but I think the pros outweigh the cons in general.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think it's the sort of thing that I think, unfortunately, this sort of conversation probably isn't the conversation that most of our audience needs to hear, and it's actually the sort of conversation that people who are not in this space already need to hear, right? Like this is kind of the double-edged sword of how you find your way in a process like this is, and maybe like this is where this problem stems from, is the average consumer just doesn't know any better, and so they see flashy stuff and things that look good and they chase that. then you kind of get to that murky, like advanced beginner / early intermediate, where suddenly you have like your tribe that you follow or whatever it is. Maybe you see some counter information, and they're the people that hear a conversation like this and maybe open their eyes a bit and get a bit more out of the process. But it's kind of hard in that early exposure stage. Like, were you corrupted by certain governing bodies and their way of life, or did you enter the fold in a sport that was about having fun and lifting weights for friends, not telling everyone you're better than them? But you know,
a very specific comment.
Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about. That's just a real general observation there, Thomas. I'm not sure where you got that from.
Yes. Okay. Well,
allegedly, it was all alleged.
Alleged. I got nothing else to say.
Yeah, me neither. Goodbye, friends.
Goodbye.